Today we're going to talk about the 5 different commonalities we found when talking to successful families about their advice and their advisory teams. The 4th of the 5 commonalities is how families communicate their expectations, and their expectations specifically around collaboration, to their advisors and their advisory teams. So my client receives an unsolicited offer of $50 million 2 months after receiving a cold call from a private equity company in their space. The client said no, not interested. 2 weeks later, the private equity company called back and increased their offer by another $10 million. Client said no. They called back again a week later, increased it by $5 million. Client said no. By the way, the client really thought that business was worth $30 to $40 million based on their earnings and what they hear on the street in their peer group. They just have some secret sauce, and the private equity company recognized that sauce. So why did they sell? It's simple. They just weren't ready. They weren't ready and they weren't prepared. They really did not have the right advisors on their team. They weren't the right age. They weren't ready to make that transition from full-time employment to full-time retirement just because the numbers seemed great. They were already making a great deal of annual income. So what we set out and we learned is that the family did not really have the right advisors on the team when getting advice around a $50, $60, $70 million deal, and that's not their only asset. So we also learned that when you think about being prepared for a transaction, it's also preparing your family in the event of your absence. If you weren't here, who would your family rely on to manage and or transact that business if the team's not prepared now? Now, we had talked about building this team year in and year out. It just never seemed to be the right time. So we set out and we interviewed corporate attorneys. We asked the CPA to bring on a fellow partner specific to one discipline in that world and attributed to their business. We engaged the estate planning attorney, and over a handful of weeks, a team was formed around providing advice for the family. And we met every 3 weeks, give or take, and during the following 6 months, a lot transpired to get this family prepared to build this business over the coming 10 years, and maybe someday think about what that next offer might look like. So during that 6-month period, first we updated the model or the forecast for the family, incorporating all their assets and the business and understanding what this would look like 20 years in the future. Again, that's the first commonality that successful families have in planning, which is they keep the end in mind. What does it all look like? And they do planning and have advisory teams surrounding that number, that plan in the future. They recapitalized the company stock in between voting and non-voting. They added trusts, which would only make sense to move some money off of the kitchen table for estate planning purposes. They did evaluation of the company. They made gifts of the non-voting stock to those trusts. And they had a family meeting, including the spouse and the children, to discuss what that forecast looked like, what the trust looked like, what the game plan was, and to introduce the advisors who worked together to put this plan in place. I think the great outcomes happen on purpose. We've learned that successful families give their advisors and their advisory teams time, separate time to strategize. So think about that. If you take your quarterback and your forecast and you share your story into the future and you ask your advisors, lock them in a room, take their cell phones away, ask your advisors, what ideas do you have to improve my outcome, to help me reach my goals, to take away some of my risk? I think advisors, when given the time, will come back with great ideas. We call it strategy stacking. One advisor comes with a baseline idea, somebody else improves upon it by an ownership structure or a tax position, and the stacking of those ideas over time have such compounding impact. It's like when you open a bottle of Snapple and there's a pop, right? You can hear it, you can feel it, you know it's going to be great. And then the quarterback goes back and updates the model. So giving your team, your advisors, time to talk about your affairs strategically is so rarely done, except it's a commonality when you talk to successful families who plan purposefully. My name's Rob Wormuth. I head the Family Office Services Group here at Legacy Planning. If you'd like to learn more about the 5 commonalities that successful families enjoy with their advice and their advisors, please visit us online at legacy-online.com. Thank you.